Now we're making progress. Welcome back. So, okay, we're in chapter 2, starting from verse 16 of Nehemiah. I'll read the Hebrew, Teresa will translate, and then Linda will read the commentary in English as we require. Okay, here we go. והסגנים לא ידעו אנה הלכתי ומה אני עושה, וליהודים ולכהנים, ולחורים ולסגנים, וליסר עושי המלאכה עד כן, לא הגדתי. ואומר להם, אתם רואים הרע אשר אנחנו בה, אשר ירושלים חרבה, ושעריה ניצצו באש. לכו ונבנה אס חומס ירושלים ולא נהיה עוד חרפה. ואגיד להם, אס יד אלוהי אשר היא טובה עלי, ואף דברי המלך אשר אמר לי, ויאמרו נקום ובנינו ויחזקו ידיהם לטובה. Okay, please translate verses 16 through 18, Teresa.
The nobles did not know where I had gone, nor what I was doing, for I had not as yet informed the Jews and the Kohanim and the aristocrats and the nobles and the others who did the work. So I said to them, you see the bad situation we are in, that Jerusalem is in ruin and its gates have been burned in fire. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem so that we will no longer be a source of humiliation. I told them of the hand of God, which was benevolent to me, and also of the king's words that he had said to me. They said, let us get up and build, and they strengthened their hands in resolve for the benefit of the city.
So again, just a brief recap that since the instructions left by Cyrus the Great, the temple was confined to smaller size, and the Jews were not allowed to build the walls of Jerusalem so it wouldn't look like they're rebelling. They were allowed to have swordsmen at the gate of the temple, but not to protect themselves against a army that was invading or anything like that. So therefore, they had to have a special appeal by Nehemiah to get permission to build the walls. And that's exactly what's finally happening here. For over a dozen years, they were subject to potential marauders at a constant concern. But now, once they build the walls, they were able to just focus on their spiritual growth. So this was not only a physical safety thing, but also a potential spiritual boon. Of course, someone who's not righteous would try to use a extra safety for evil. Now they could get away with doing more sin. So that's why we see in the Second Temple period, there were some righteous times and there's some not so righteous times. So the righteous use it for righteousness, and the wicked use it for wickedness. So, spiritually speaking, this explains why there's world peace when Mashiach comes. Because the key about Mashiach time, people know the truth and they try to serve God from now on. When people try to serve God from now on, so now they're not going to abuse the gifts, and God won't have to punish them by taking them away again, right? Like if a parent buys a teenager a car, and they keep getting into accidents, and the child still lives in the house, so the parent may eventually take the keys back temporarily until the child goes to some auto safety classes or something. So too, part of the cause of the Second Temple was that during the Second Temple period, of course, there was not righteousness at all times. So therefore, just like in the first temple, sin caused its destruction. By the second temple, sin causes destruction. And by the third temple, a lack of sin will allow it to be eternal. So the physical is just a potential consequence, but more directly a spiritual result of the spiritual choices people make. So the year they're rebuilding it, the temple's already been built. Okay, but this is like a solidification of the return of the Jews to the Holy Land. And of course, that makes the enemies of Israel rise up. So here we're going to have a description of the enemy of Israel, Sanballat. And from chapter 2 through chapter 6, he'll repeatedly return to try to cause trouble to the Jews under Nehemiah. Okay, so verses 19 through 20, that will be the conclusion of chapter 2. So I'll read those two in the Hebrew. Vayishma Sanballat Achoroni v'Tovia Ha'aved Ha'amoni v'Geshem Ha'arvi v'Yal Igu Lanu v'Yivzu Alenu v'Yamru Ma Hadavar Zeh Asher Atem Osim Ha'al Hamelech Atem Mordim v'Ashivo Sam Davar v'Omar Lahem Elhei Hashamayim Hu Yatzliach Lanu v'Anachnu Avadov Nakum Uvaninu. Okay, please translate verses 19 and 20.
Then Sanballat, the Horonite, Tobiah, the Ammonite, a slave, and Gershom the Arab heard. They ridiculed us and were contemptuous, can't talk, of us, and said, "What is this that you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" I answered them a word and said to them, "The God of heaven will grant us success, and we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no portion, no merit, nor remembrance in Jerusalem."
So Sanballat was a Horonite, Tobiah was an Ammonite, and Geshem was an Arab. So let's look at the commentary here, because we haven't heard these terms. But just saying it outside of the description of the commentary, this is actually the beginning of the Samaritans. Okay, so the beginning of the Samaritans were a few races joining together to become a force to keep the Jews out of resettling the Holy Land during the Second Temple Commonwealth. So it included the Horonites, the Ammonites, and the Arabs. The more things change, the more things stay the same. So you wouldn't believe that in our generation, possibly an Arab or two might be upset with Jews returning to the Holy Land. Imagine that. Okay, so let's go into the commentary. Linda, you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because it said Linda's iPhone is there, but we just want to make sure you're there. Okay. Let's see. Let's go on to verse. Let's see. Here and there, so it doesn't say much commentary, but start reading from verse 19, and I'll just page through the other books, the other resources we have. And
Heard. This is where you want me to start, at heard. Rashi comments, when they heard that we planned to reconstruct the city walls, and Geshem the Arab, Geshem was an Arabian enemy of the Jews, Mitrani. Are you rebelling against the king? Are you building the walls of the city as a fortress so that you can rebel against the king? Rashi, Ralbag, and Mezzadot. Malbim's interpretation of the alleged rebellion differs slightly. King Cyrus had issued a decree halting the reconstruction of the city, Ezra 4:21, and the decree of a Persian king could not be repealed. See Esther 8:8. Thus, the enemies alleged that the reconstruction of the walls constituted rebellion against Cyrus's decree. I answered them a word.
Yeah, so let me, if you don't mind, pause it there. So this is in the days before, of course, cell phone notifications or even radio. So apparently they did not hear the word that King Darius had given permission for Nehemiah to lead the Jews in rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. But Nehemiah took the opportunity to also admonish them for their audacity to try to stop the people God gave the land to from returning. That was just sacrilegious. Let me just look over here. Moment. Okay, now according to Rabbi Schwab, I don't know if you can, let me try to see where this camera will. This camera is not showing here. If I put it over here, no. You see, the AI is actually interfering with the video of this broadcast, and from my end, let me see if I could turn off. Wow. Okay, so sometimes it's better without AI. Okay, so can't even hold up the cover. But if you look at previous videos of our class, you can see what this looks like. It's Rav Schwab and Ezra Nehemiah. So he describes that the Arabs were originally not indigenous to Eretz Israel. They were Bedouins who roamed all over the deserts of the Middle East. Apparently, this Geshem must have been a powerful leader of a group of Bedouins, a sheikh, and for reasons unknown to us, joined forces with Sanballat and Tovia in their hate campaign against the Jews. So these were Bedouins, not the most Arabs would think of nowadays, who are mostly Ishmaelites. So okay, so you see that a mixture. Bedouins are also part of the Samaritans, but we see here it's a multi-national group of basically squatters in the Holy Land trying to cause trouble for the Jews trying to return. When God announces he's giving the land eternally to the Jews, but they would be exiled if they sinned. So God means what he says when he exiles his people. And then so sometimes you have the wicked just reinterpreted according to their preferences. Like, oh, they're not here anymore, so that part was true, but now it's our land. You understand? That sort of arrogant attitude. And so we see in the Gullus of Edom, the Roman exile, for 1900 years, nobody else was able to make the desert bloom like Israel. And when the Jews returned, even with a secular government, God's blessing that the land would bloom again when they returned to the land occurred. So a lot of the things that are occurring in fulfillment of certain prophecies, to this point, has been largely connected to God's fulfillment of his own promises to Israel, and in repeated verses throughout Tanakh.
you know?
Was there a question?
More a remembrance. This seems to be the very first time that it's documented that the Arab community has begun its stand. The Islam and the Muslims have begun their stand against Israel.
Well, again, there was no Islam back then.
No,
And right,
okay,
and these Arabs are not the traditional Arabs we think of, the Ishmaelites. These are the Bedouins who nowadays are friends with Israel. So
okay,
it's a different breed of a situation, but it's just that. So basically, the Ishmaelites, when they moved north, they continued the Bedouin style
okay,
until they didn't, and then the Arabs of the Ishmaelites are the ones who made the made the caliphate and all these sort of things. They became an empire because probably in merit that they were descendants of Abraham, so they had merit of their forefather to be successful. So this explains even as they're creating a a different religion from what God wanted, they were still blessed because better a monotheistic descendant of Abraham than somebody who's into idolatry that in the historically often led to eventually human sacrifice. So we see that how God, for example, in the time of the Persians, he even gave prophecy to support the Cyrus the Great and call him out for praise even before he was born, even though Cyrus was a Zoroastrian, because that was better than the Baal worshippers who were giving human sacrifices. You understand? So anybody who wants to improve the situation, God shows a blessing to. So it's always good to serve God to the best of one's ability, even if they feel they couldn't serve God as great as some of the great people in history. It doesn't hurt to do good. God rewards every good deed. Okay, so when it's obvious what you have no portion to the Samaritans, that they would have no portion with Israel. But what does it mean they have no merit? Tzedakah. Okay, so let's look at the commentary on nor merit. That's the last two lines on page 17 in the Art Scroll Blue Edition. Linda, see that?
they
Nor merit?
have no merit.
Ibn
Verse,
Ezra. Left
oh,
hand.
nor merit Ibn
Uh-huh.
Ezra. Is this
Yeah,
where you are?
yeah.
Okay. Nor merit. Ibn Ezra defines Zadik here as a righteous act. Zadika here as a righteous act. You may not take part in the righteous act of constructing Jerusalem. Raubag refers to his interpretation that the preceding phrase, you have no part, excluded them from taking part in the construction. He explains that the phrase or merit, literally charity, was intended to disqualify them from contributing funds, including, i.e., charity, for the reconstruction of the walls. Raubag. Mesudos understands the mention of merit as an oblique reference to the king's generosity in permitting the Jews to return to Jerusalem. It was the king's grant that allowed the Jews to return to Jerusalem. He was charitable to Jerusalem, but you were not. You cannot claim credit for any meritorious act toward Jerusalem.
See, so even if a person can't personally participate in helping someone who's doing good, it never hurts to participate in any way possible, even just sending words of praise or anything such as that. They could have had an internal connection to the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Instead, they're considered like dust you have to sweep away. Never. It's pretty sad. All right. Any questions before we continue to the next chapter? All right. So it's pretty good. Finally reaching chapter 3. This is the third week we've been trying to get there. So that's pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to read Hebrew and then Teresa will translate again. ויוקם אל ישיב הכהן הגדול, ואחיו הכהנים ויבנו את שער הצאן, המה קידשוהו ויעמידו דל סוסיו ועד מגדל. המאה קידשוהו עד מגדל חננאל. ועל ידו בנו אנשי יריחו, ועל ידו בנה זכור בן אימרי. ואיס שער הדגים בנו בני השנאה, המה פירוהו ויעמידו דל סוסיו מנעו לב ובריחיו ועל ידם החזיק מרמוס בן אוריה בן הקוץ ועל ידם החזיק משולם בן ברכיה בן משי זבאל ועל ידם החזיק צדוק בן בנה ועל ידם החזיקו התקועים ואדיריהם ולא הביאו צווארם בעבודת אדוניהם. Okay, please translate the first 5 verses of chapter 3, Teresa.
Elishib, the Cohen Gadol, arose along with his brethren, the Kohanim, and they rebuilt the sheep gate. They sacrificed it and erected its doors. They sanctified the wall up to the tower of Hama'ah, and up to the tower of Hanel. Next to him, the men of Jericho built the wall, and next to him, Zachar, son of Imri, built. The children of Hasinah built the fish gate. They roofed it and erected its doors, its locks, and its bars. Next to them, Merinoth, son of Uri, son of Hakkas, reinforced the wall next to them.
Meshulam, yeah.
Son of Berakah, son of Mishadela, reinforced. Next to them, Zadok, son of Baana, reinforced.
Now these the common Latin just pronouns for substituting for the actual names of these righteous people. It's a little disheartening, because Meshe Zabel became Meshe Zabel. So it's if they were listening to somebody reading this, they wouldn't be sure if they were being talked about using the English translation, which is these pronouns are taken from the Latin, and like when you have a name like, for example, Ezra, it's exactly the same in Hebrew or English, right? But when you have these other names, really, why would they even use the Latin? It's just diluted, I just imagine if everyone around the world were taught the actual pronunciation of these names, so people could have learned Hebrew easier, right? Most of the hard Hebrew words in this book are just pronouns that everyone would know if if a lot of the translators, not necessarily, Jewish translators, but a lot of the translators in history would just use the original Hebrew and try to be phonetic about it. All right, please translate verse 5.
Next to them, the Tikkotites reinforced, but their dignitaries did not put their necks to the labor of their Lord.
Okay, so let's look at the commentary on that phrase. Their dignitaries did not put their necks to the labor of their Lord. Okay, can you check that out, Linda? That's on verse
The
5.
Tekotites, those who came, is this where you want me to read? The
next paragraph.
Tekotites?
Next
But their
paragraph.
dignitaries did
Yeah.
not put their necks to the labor of the Lord. The rich among them did not aid in the construction of the wall. Their God's labor, a labor for the sake of God, Rashi and Mezidos. Ibn Ezra and Ralbag, however, understand their master as a reference to a mortal, a family member. Ibn Ezra, a taskmaster, Ralbag, who was appointed to supervise their construction work, the rich Tekotites, who did not aid the overseer in building the wall. According to Malbin, this verse states quite the reverse. The powerful Tekotites did engage in the construction work. Those Jews who lived in Etz Israel before King Cyrus permitted the Jews to return to their homeland, Ezra chapter 1, were under the jurisdiction of non-Jewish satraps. See commentary to verse 7:1-3. The Tekotites were among them and were therefore obligated to follow the instruction of their master the satrap. But the rich, powerful Tekotites freed themselves from this satrap and were able to join in the construction. Alternatively, the Tekotites followed the instruction of the Jewish taskmaster appointed over them. The rich ones, however, refused to accept him and chose instead to construct a different section of the wall. The work of this second rich group of Tekotites is described below, verse 27. See commentary there.
So the Tekoites, what exactly did they do? Were they helpful or not helpful? So from the simple meaning of the verse, the verse seems to be saying the Tekoites did help, but their dignitaries did not. But ArtScroll gives these alternate interpretations quoting different sources. So even though this may not be the final word on it as far as what actually occurred, at least from the simple meaning of the verse implies that the Tekoites did help. Many of their leaders did not, or did not give it sufficient effort. Okay, let's continue on. Question?
Well, it seems like there's two groups of Tekoites, the poor
Right.
ones and the rich ones.
Right, and it looks like the poor ones certainly helped out.
Okay.
Tekoa was one of the cities of Judah, so. Okay, so continuing on to verse 6. Veis Shar Yeshana Hechiziku Yoyada ben Hoseach Meshulam ben Besodia Hema Keruhu Yamidu Dal Sosav Uman Ulav Verichav Val Yadam Hechizik Matalia Hagivoni Viadon Hameronosi, Anshe Givon Vamitzpah, Lechise Hachas Ever Hanahar. Al Yado Hachazik Uziel Ben Charahayo, Sorfim Val Yado Hachazik Hananya Ben Harakachim, Viazru Yerushalayim Ad Hachoma Hacharova. You please translate verses 3, 6, 7, and 8.
Yoadad, son of Pasah, and Meshulam, son of Basodah, reinforced the old gate. They roofed it and erected its doors, its locks, and its bars. Next to them, Melatah, the Gideonite, Jordan, the Ronatad, and the men of Gideon and Mishpah reinforced up to the gate of the governor of the Trans-Euphrates region. Next to him, Uzra, son of Harhana, of the goldsmiths, reinforced. Next to him, Hanaa, son of the perfumers, reinforced. They fortified Jerusalem up to the boardwalk. 9 also, or just stop at 8?
Are you muted?
No. Rabbi, you're muted.
Yeah, pause after 8, please. Okay, so there is in the Tanakh series, the white edition of the Art Scroll, there is a map in the appendix. Russell, you see this map over here?
Yes.
Make it out a little. That's an. Can you show on your screen that map? Because my AI controls on this computer are not letting me show it.
Not simply no, because I don't. Oh, hold on a minute. I know. I see.
In the appendix of the white edition.
In the white edition.
Yeah, it's page 8.
It's the first of the appendices.
Page 8, you said?
Yeah, the equivalent of page 226, 226 in the white edition. Do you have a map there? All the way in the back of the book.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that map. Okay. So the dark area on that map is the modern old city. The old city built by the Ottoman Empire. This city that they're trying to fix is in the time of Nehemiah is twice the size. So a lot more work to do, and at any moment they could be attacked. And they didn't have machines to help them. So, and they only had 10% of the population with them. So you see the daunting task that's happening.
Mm.
So it was very brave of Nehemiah to stand up to the Samaritans to instead and being a bit antagonistic towards them. You know, one might have tried to placate them so that until the wall's built, and then send them a nasty letter. But Nehemiah was standing for truth and justice and the Israeli way. So that's nice. So it's one of the nice side benefits of reading this book. You're seeing somebody who's a scion of King David, responding to events that could have happened in our generation and for most of these concepts, right? So it's really amazing. Thank you. So Yeah, that's one of the cool things about Nehemiah. Okay, so just to mention it previously, we discussed there's different Gemaras. One line of reasoning among Chazal is that Nehemiah and Zerubbabel were the same person, and another line of exegesis by the sages of the Talmud is that they were two different people. Yeah, but the Peshuta Shel Mikra leans towards, in my opinion, leans towards the fact that they were two different people. And we're going to see that further on in this book as well. Just for example, the Rav Schwab that we've quoted a few times, from the KAJ Rav Schwab. So he, it's his view. He holds by the Talmudic opinion that Zerubbabel and Nehemiah were the same person. It's complicated according to Peshuta Shel Mikra. One aspect of Peshuta Shel Mikra, the simple meaning of the text, is that there's introductions in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah about what year the governor was speaking, whether it was, so then the total would be 12 years. If they're two different people, 12 years for Nehemiah, 19 years for Zerubbabel. So if they're the same person, so now we're talking about in excess of 30 years, right? So it's different, but it could fit that way according to that reasoning. It's just again, as we go through the book, hopeful to show you further reasons why I believe it's we have to go according to the Chazal. It says they're two separate people. In addition, there's another quote from Chazal, a debate whether Zerubbabel, we discussed this previously in the book of Ezra, was Zerubbabel Sheish Batzar from the first chapter of Ezra, or was Sheish Batzar actually Daniel? Okay, so if Sheish Batzar and Zerubbabel and Nehemiah are three different people, that means the first governor was Sheish Batzar, which is Daniel, for 1 year. The second governor was Zerubbabel for 19 years, and the third governor is now Nehemiah for 12 years. And Daniel, Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah are all skins of King David. There is even one opinion, however, that believes that one of them was a Kohen from the tribe of Levi. So, and there's different opinions, but according to the Midrash, and we demonstrated in class, and we're going to demonstrate further in the coming week, God willing. So that my assertion that Daniel, Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah are three different people. So now we're in the third governorship of the Second Temple Commonwealth, and only now the walls are being built. Okay, so in other words, over 2 decades, the walls were down while the Jews were trying to establish themselves again in the land. So now we're at the point where, thank God, there's hope for improved safety. Okay, where did we read up to? Did we go through verse 8?
We went through 8, yes.
Okay. All right, continuing on in verse 9. Valyadam hachazik Rafaya ben Chor Sart Chatzi Pelech Yerushalayim. Valyadam hachazik Yedaya ben Charumaf Beneged Beso Valyado hachazik Chatush ben Chashavnaya Mida Shenes hachazik Malkiah ben Harim, V'chashuv ben Pachas, Moab, Veis Migdal HaTanurim. Okay, please translate verses 9, 10, and 11.
Next to them, Raphaah, son of Hur, the officer over half the district of Jerusalem, reinforced. Next to them, opposite his house, Jedaiah, son of Harumphah, reinforced. Next to him, Hattas, son of Hashbadneah, reinforced. Makajah, son of Harmon, and Hashub, son of the governor of Moab, reinforced a similar measure, and the Tower of Ovens.
So the difficulty in reading these pronouns, it's Latin. It's not Hebrew. It's not the actual names. It's simply Latin translations that are being put here so that people will have familiarity with these names from other translations of the Bible. But so it's just it's actually like a kind of a sign of the exile, that it's so hard to pronounce some of these names. It's because they're not really directly connected to the Hebrew in every case. Only in certain cases it's pretty simple to figure it out. For example, the son of Haram, right? So your only question is, was that Haram or Harim, right? And guess what? It's Harim, right? But I mean, it's pretty easy. You see, you can just guess. It's one of two ways.
Yeah.
But by some of these other Latin words for pronouns for people's names, it becomes really really complicated. Like Ezekiel for Yechezkel. If I was in a room and they said they were announcing people's names, and 1 minute they said Ezekiel, and the next minute later they would announce Yechezkel, right? I would not assume that's the same person. But if you look in the book of Ezekiel, anytime they use the word Ezekiel, they're saying a very different sounding name from Yechezkel. And if they wanted to, when they're doing the first English translations, right? Tinsdale and King James, right? They could have put a Y in there. Why do they have to just start with an E for Ezekiel? They could have made it at least a little bit, or transpose it with a J if they're not, so at least maybe there's a Y sounding J, like it.
Was there a reason they chose the Latin over the Hebrew for these names?
I know, but a lot of these choices were made about 500 years ago by people in Europe. So churches and stuff like this. So
It may have made more sense to them, especially being in Europe, being in Latin. It may have made more sense to them doing that. I don't know.
Well, there could have been more people speaking Latin at that time, but it just is wild.
Right, but the actual prophecy was not in Latin, so
No.
you would want to be faithful to the prophecy, you would think,
right?
If you're trying to spread the prophecy. So
could this be one of the concessions the Jewish people had to make to get it printed?
No,
to the politics of the time.
The Jewish people did not want it even printed because they're afraid of if you look in the King James Bible, and for example, if you study with Rabbi Tovia Singer, there's some words in there that don't exist, so that's heretical content. Okay, so it's just it's pretty sad that but this explains in part, I mean, historical evidence why God's told the Jewish people in the book of Isaiah to give the light unto the nations, right? Because whether or not Jews were, as a collective, were always faithful, they certainly preserved the Holy Writ correctly. That's certainly we see that in Jewish history. And even in the secular government of Israel, right? They didn't say, "Oh, let's change the Bible," right? So even the secular government in Israel is continuing to preserve the original Masoretic text handed down since the days of the prophets. So you see that? Even secular Jews are engaged in a form of continuing the light unto the nations. That's pretty amazing, right? And I mean, God knows that God knew every nation would sin, including Israel. But God knew that one of the prize benefits of going with Israel is that they would preserve the word accurately. Just like, for example, if you want to go faster, you use a faster horse to drag your wagon, right? If you want to climb a hill, maybe you use a more powerful horse. You go for like an Arabian horse to go fast. You go with a Clydesdale to pull a heavier load, something like that. So so God knows the benefits of every nation, and the benefit of Israel is they would preserve the Torah He would give through their prophets for eternity without changing it, even though God knew there would be times there would be some idolatry in some segments of Israel, and there would be some secular forces in some segments of Israel. But we see that there's always been a religious segment of the Jewish people, and they always preserve the holy word. And we see in the book of Kings, there was a generation where the evil kings were trying to erase the Torah, but God made it that a Torah scroll was saved, right? Remember, it was preserved by the Kohanim. They hid a Torah scroll in the temple, and then the Torah was restored from that. So thank God. But so God knows these things, and it just shows God's genius. He knew that not even Israel would avoid sin, but He could work with Israel because there was enough righteous people throughout history in Israel that the light unto the nations would be preserved. And when it's preserved exactly the way it was given thousands of years ago. So, I mean, I've heard biblical criticism by some Christian scholars against Israel repeatedly, but I never heard this praise. At least they didn't say. At least the Jews accurately preserved the prophecies of God. And this is a fact. So, just God knows what He's doing. Thank God. And I said previously that in Exodus it says that Israel is the firstborn of God's firstborn. The implication is that every nation is also born from God. But Israel is a spiritual elder. They should be heeded to when they're given advice. And I used the metaphor that previously that it's like the children that wanted to camp out in the backyard, and the parents said, "Just listen to your older brother. If he says it's time to come in when he tells you to." So that's the entire significance of Israel having all of these nice phrases like Am Segula, treasured nation, Mamlechus Kohanim, kingdom of priests, is just the elder will be given the information so that all the children can follow it. But it does not mean that any of the children are loved less. Often we find that the younger children are loved even more, right? Showed more love because they need to feel reassured that God still loves them. So that's a wonderful thing when Mashiach comes. Anyone who's not rebelling against God will be eligible to receive love. That's a good thing, so it's not just that people could also go to heaven, people can also be loved by God. And that's awesome. Good stuff. All right. Okay, did we read through verse 11?
Yes.
Good. Okay. All right, let's go to the commentary, Linda. On verse 11, the third paragraph, son of the governor.
Son of the governor of Moab, literally the son of the ruler of Moab. The Talmud, Tanis 28a, identifies the Fahath Moab, literally the governor of Moab, as King David or his nephew Joab, both of whom were descended from the Moabite princess Ruth. See Ruth 14:22, Art Scroll Ezra 2:5. The Tower of the
2:6. Yeah, so the Pachas Moab, this is the third time in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah so far that Pachas Moab has been used. One time in Ezra, I believe was in the last chapter, it was used in the negative sense. Some of the people who intermarried included someone from the family of the Pachas Moab. So I think that phrase was instituted by Ezra, so that it would be a euphemism to not bring shame to the house of David. As out of respect to King David, his family was associated with the intermarriage of that one family of his, that intermarried. One or two families intermarried. Of course, all the others were keeping the Torah, but just so that it wouldn't be a direct slight towards the righteous King David and his righteous descendants. Therefore, the euphemism Pachas Moab was used. That was my conjecture about this Talmudic concept from Gemara Tanis 28a. Okay. All right, so a lot of this chapter is a lot of pronouns. So we're going to have to go through it. That's why I'm not quoting from every commentary, because it would take us a month to go through one chapter if we went through every commentary on this. But let's continue. Okay, so I'm here at least to help you correctly pronounce the original prophecy of the names of the people recorded here. And then we'll also try to pronounce the the Latinized version. So people who have only read an English version of this can find familiarity as well. Okay, continuing in verse 12 in the Hebrew. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask the question. Remember to unmute your microphone before asking a question. Valyado hechazik Shalom ben Halochesh Sar Chatzi Pelech Yerushalayim Hu v'nosav Eis Shar Hagai Hechazik Chanun v'yoshvei Zanoach Hema v'nuhu v'yamidu Dal Sosav Man Ulav V'richav V'elfama Bachoma Ad Shar Ha'ashafos Veis Shar Ha'ashpos Nechazik Malkia Ven Rechav Sar Pelech Beis HaKorem Hu Yivnenu V'Amid Dal Sosav Man Ulav Uverichav Ve'es Shar Ha'ayin Hechazik Shalun Ben Kol Chose Sar Pelech HaMitzpah Hu Yivnenu V'Tal Lenu V'Amid Dal Sosav Man Ulav Uverichav Veis Chomas Berechas Hashelach Lagan Hamelach V'Ad Hamalos Hayordos Meir David. All right, let's translate verses 12 through 15.
Shallum, son of Haloshash, the officer over the half of the district of Jerusalem, reinforced he together with his daughters, Hanun, and the inhabitants of Zanuk, reinforced the gate of the valley. He built it and erected its doors, its locks, and its bars, along with 1,000 cubits of the wall up to the dung gate. Malakah,
Malchia,
Machia, son of Rakab, officer of the district of Beth Karim, reinforced the dung gate. He built it and erected its doors, its locks, and its bars. Shallum, son of Koharetz,
what was that?
Horetz,
What was
son
that?
of the district of Mitzpah, reinforced the spring gate. He built it, covered it, and erected its doors, its locks, and its bars. And also the wall of the pool of Shalah up to the king's garden and up to the steps descending from the city of David.
Okay, so the dung gate is the gate of Jerusalem closest to the temple, and some of the you know, there's so much holiness involved with the sacrifices that even the dung of the animals was removed from the temple and taken out of the gate of the city. That's how elevated and spiritual and just the nobility of treating the temple with respect to show highest respect to God. Not even the animal's dung was allowed to remain in the temple. So the gate where the priests would take out and the Levites would take out the dung, that would be that was called the dung gate. And even today, you could find the southern gate of Jerusalem closest to the Temple Mount is called Dung Gate. So you can find the actual gate. Now, again, you're looking at that map in the back of the art scroll, white Tanakh edition. So that part of Jerusalem is very similar to the modern map of Jerusalem. So the Dung Gate in the modern old city of Jerusalem is at the same place where it was before. Remember, the modern old city is only from the Ottomans, so it's only maybe 1,000 years old, a little less. But it's again, that map is really helpful because it reminds you the old city, the original old city in the time of Nehemiah, twice as large as the current old city of Jerusalem. Pretty interesting.
So they changed the names of these other gates, right? Like there's not still
A Damascus gate or
There is a Damascus gate. Yeah.
there is a
Yeah.
Damascus gate. But what was that one earlier? Watergate, Sheep Gate, the
Right. Some of these are not
Hamakah
currently
Gate.
right. Now there may be more modern, as in only 1,000-year-old gates that correspond to these, but the names were not preserved because maybe they're like a few meters over from where they used to be, or something like that. It's just fascinating, talking about concepts of the book of Nehemiah occurred 2,400 years ago, and the very same gate still exists. It's really cool. Especially when you look at the map and you realize, the current old city, which looks ancient, is only half the size of the original old city. Really amazing. But this also explains why, in the book of Kings, how is it that so many people escaped from Judea to run to Jerusalem to escape from their enemies? It was much bigger. Very interesting. So city of David was it included the mountain of the city of David in Israel today, and Mount Zion, Har Zion, and the Palace of David, all those connecting. So it was on the border. If you look on the map, the border of the valley of Ben Hinnom. Okay. By continuing in verse 16. Achrav Hazik Nehemiah ben Azbuk Sar Chatzi Palach Beis Tzur an Neged Kivrei David Vad HaBarecha HaSuya Vad Beis HaGiborim. Hey, please translate verse 16. Just verse 16.
Beyond this, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, the officer of half the district of Bethsor, reinforced up to opposite the graves of David and up to the man-made pool and up to the house of the warriors.
Okay. So the phrase the graves of King David. King David was only buried once.
I hope so.
I mean, I wasn't there, but I'm guessing here. Okay. Yeah, your teacher does a lot of that, right? Okay. But but the graves of David, so in other words, it would seem that we're talking about the graves of the kings of David, right? Or right, maybe graves of David would refer to, for example, where his wives were buried. But the implication here, we're talking about the house of David. So in other words, the kings of David. There was as implied in the Book of Kings, a cemetery just for the kings of Judah. And we were told that King Uzziah Azariah, he was not buried there because of his leprosy, but all the other righteous kings of Judah were buried there, right? So, but it's the simple implication here is that why is it called of David, right? And we're talking about probably generations after David. Therefore, the kings of the house of David, and the simple meaning would seem to indicate that King David was buried with them, right? He didn't have his own special crypt. If you go to the city of Jerusalem today, there is a special crypt for King David. And there is a debate among historians, is that the actual burial site of King David? So there is, I think, a possible implication in this verse that is not likely to be the actual burial place of King David. It was probably just by some other righteous person that God wanted to give honor to, so he made people mistake him that his grave is for King David's. But I know when, just an anecdote, a personal spiritual experience that I had. When I was in Israel, I went to the assumed gravesite of King David on Mount Zion, and I did not have the similar spiritual experience as when I went to the grave of Rachel, the matriarch Rachel, Kever Rachel. So when I went to Kever Rachel, when I went into the room with her grave, I felt like I'm home. You know what I'm saying? It felt like I just came home to talk to my mother or something. It felt I just had this
The powerful place.
like a psychic impression or whatever it was, but you know, how that's how holy she was. Yeah, you know, just like, yeah. And I did not have that when I went into King David's tomb. And that, I mean, just from a emotional perspective of that, it makes me think that it's, you know, the implication here of it being a different grave from, and you know, according to those who say it's a different grave from the assumed grave in Jerusalem. That it seems like that's the correct shot, the correct way to learn it. That King David was buried with other righteous kings. You know, Hezekiah was buried near him, for example, and he's not buried where people are assuming it's the grave of King David on Mount Zion. So that just my personal personal experience, you know. I mean, remember King David was the editor and author of most of the Psalms. So he has so much holiness. He's, you know, spiritually similar to Rachel, right? So, I mean, unless I was just having a bad day, but I would have thought that, you know, the same kind of overwhelming spirituality would come forth. Now, someone told me that they went to the cave of the patriarchs, and then they also went to Kever Rachel, and they felt a greater spirituality at Kever Rachel. So then I explained to them the cave of the patriarchs is not the Ma'aras Machpelah in the current Hebron area. Ma'aras Machpelah in the current Hebron area was built by primarily by the Romans in a area leading to the caves of the patriarch. So it's like built at the entrance to the cave, it's not the actual burial place. So it's normal to not feel the spirituality of being in the presence of the patriarch. You understand? So Kever Rachel, thank God, is like a kind of spiritual litmus test. Anybody who goes there, you're experiencing a real spiritual experience. You know what? It was similar, like when I went to the Western Mall, right? The Kosel Hamarabi. So when I was there, so then it felt serenity, like, you know, like even more than the average synagogue. You understand? But it was like a serenity I also felt at Kever Rachel. I guess that's, you know, the being close to the divine presence. And so, but I did not feel that in the alleged tomb of David on Mount Zion today. And my friend who went to the cave of the patriarchs didn't feel it there either. But you know, so in both cases, I think that these great people in history are not buried in cave of patriarch, and you know, in the actual cave of the patriarchs, then you'll find Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But in the building where that's called the cave of the patriarchs is again, I'm not sure if it's a quarter mile, half mile away from the actual cave, and so there wouldn't be that same kind of spiritual experience. So, in other words, if you're going to the Holy Land and you want to visit a place where known spiritual activities, check out the Western Wall and check out the cave of the Kever Rachel, the burial place of Rachel. So, very special. Right. So, but it's very interesting the implication here, right? Here in Nehemiah, it goes exactly according to that experience that I had. That it didn't feel like that was the same grave of King David, at least from a spiritual perspective. All right, we went through verse 16. Let's go to from verse 17. Any questions before we continue? Or any comments about these spiritual experiences? If you had a very spiritual experience in a holy place, feel free to share it with us. It'd be nice for people to know these things and know where to visit. But at least my advice, Western Wall and the grave of Rachel. Okay, 17. Acharav Hachaziku Alavim Rachum ben Bani Al Yado Hachazik Hashavya Sar Chatzi Felech Kiila Lefilko Acharav Hachaziku Achehem Bavai ben Chenadad Sar Chatzi Pelech Kiila Chazik Al Yado Ezer ben Yeshua Sar Hamitzpah Mida Shenis Mineged Alos Haneshek Hamiksoa. Okay, please translate verses 17, 18, and 19. Teresa.
Beyond this, the Levites reinforced. Ram, son of Bani, next to him Hashba'ah, officer of half the district of Keilah, and his district reinforced. After him, their brothers under Bava, son of Henadad, officer of half the district of Keilah, reinforced. Next to him, Ezra, son of Yeshua, officer of Mishpah, reinforced a similar measure. Opposite the
Ascent.
Opposite the ascent to the armory at the corner.
Okay, Linda, if you could check out on page 24, the first paragraph, opposite the ascent to the armory. Page 24, the English.
What?
Page 24 in the blue edition. The English, if you could read that, the first paragraph, opposite.
Opposite. Opposite the ascent to the armory, the wall was now built adjacent to the entrance to the armory of the mighty warriors. Verse 16, Rashi. Rabag asserts that the arms were manufactured in this building. According to Ibn Ezra, however, Aloth HaNeshek was simply the name of a place. At the corner, the armory stood at the corner of the wall, Rashi, specifically the southwest corner of the city wall, Malbin.
Okay, so southwest is left and down, right? Southwest, left and down. So as you know, the temple is on the southeast, right and down. Okay. So in other words, this would be, and again, if you remember that map, this would be actually near the actual wall of the old city of Jerusalem nowadays. Because the eastern and western walls are very similar to the original walls of the old city. Continuing in verse 20. Achrav hechara hechazik baruch ben Zakai mida shenis min hamikzoa ad Pesach beis el Yashiv hakohen hagadol. Achrav hechazik Meremos ben Uriah ben Hakotz mida shenis mi Pesach beis el Yashiv vad tachlis beis el Yashiv. V'achrav hechaziku hakohanim anshe hakikar. Okay, so please read through verse 22, 20, 21, and 22.
After him, Barak, son of Zakah in enthusiastically reinforced a similar measure from the corner up to the entrance of the house of Elish, Elishib, the Cohen Gadol. After him, Meremoth, son of Ira, son of Hakaz, reinforced a similar measure from the entrance of Elishib's house up to the end of Elishib's house. After him, the Cohen Cana, hold on. After him, the Kohanim, men of the plain, reinforced.
Yeah. Okay, continuing verse 23 in the Hebrew. Acharav hachaziku hakonim anshe hakakar. What's that? Yeah, Acharav hachazik Binyamin v'chashuv neged Beis Sam. Acharav hachazik Azariah ben Maaseya ben Ananya etzel Beiso. Acharav hachazik Binui ben Chednadad mida shenis mi Beis Azariah ad hamikzoa vad hapina. Halal ben Uzai מנגד המקצוע המגדול היוצא מבייס המלך העליון, אשר לחצר המטרה אחריו פדליה בן פרוש. והנסינים היו יושבים באופל עד נגד שער המים למזרח והמגדל היוצא. Okay, please translate through verse 26.
After him, Benjamin and Hashub opposite their houses after him. Azra, son of Manasseh, son of Anathah,
Anya.
reinforced near his house. After him, Benu, son of Henadad, reinforced a similar measure from the house of Azarah up to the corner and up to the tower. Paal, son of Uzzah, opposite the corner of the tower that extends from the king's upper house, which is adjacent to the prison courtyard. After him, Pedaiah, son of Parosh.
And one more verse.
Okay, the Nethanim who dwelt in Ophel, up to the opposite the water gate on the east, and also the extending tower.
Linda, please read the commentary on verse 26.
The Nethinim. The Nethinim were descendants of the Canaanite inhabitants of the city of Gibeon, who deceived Joshua into allowing them to convert to Judaism. In consequence, they were designated by Joshua to serve as water carriers and woodcutters. Joshua chapter 9. They were exiled, and many returned to the Holy Land with the nation when Cyrus permitted the Jews to return to Jerusalem. See further Art Scroll Ezra 243. In Ophel, the Nethinim were in the place called Ophel, Rashi. Ophel literally means the heights, Ralbag, or the high stronghold, as in Numbers 14:44. But they defiantly ascended. See also Micah 4:8, Ibn Ezra, up to opposite the water gate on the east. The water gate was located on the eastern side of the city. This gate adjoined the temple, Yoma 69b Malbim. The Nethinim dwelt in the heights adjoining the wall. They therefore constructed the wall from the area adjoining their homes in Ophel until the Watergate. Rashi. Melvin reads the word reinforced from verse 24 into this passage and combines our verse with the preceding one, verse 25. Pedaiah and the Nethinim strengthened from strengthened from the area adjacent to the royal palace until the water gate to the east, and also the extending tower. In addition, they built the tower that extended, i.e., jutted out from the inside of the wall toward the city, Rashi, or from the outside of the wall away from the city, Mezudos. Malbim identifies the extending tower as the tower that extends from the king's house, verse 25. Palal built the wall from the corner until the area of the tower that extended from the royal palace. Nethinim built the tower itself.
So the Nethinim, the Gibeonites, they were in exile in Babylon. They had a chance to break free of the Jews by just being Babylonian citizens, but they didn't. So that shows that the symbiotic relationship that was established in the days of Joshua, what looked like it was for a punishment, became the start of a beautiful friendship. So the Nesinim became, not only did they give up human sacrifice, but they became like permanent Ger Toshav, B'nai Noach, living with the Jews, and they went in and out of the exile with the Jews. Very amazing.
Well, they never converted, they stayed Ger.
Right. Because they deceived, Joshua punished them with a decree they could never convert. They had to.
But they still became true believers. That's amazing.
Amazing, and they had. It proves that the ancient Israelis were treating them humanely. Otherwise, they would have stayed back in Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not only that, this shows that they were the water bearers and the wood cutters. They served the temple joyously.
And not only that, when the temples were rebuilt soon in our days, people would pay money to become the water carriers, and Joshua gave them a free access card for eternity. So, and why would Joshua do that? He's a prophet, right? He's punishing them because they deceived Israel, and he can't let the Sanhedrin be treated that way, right? But what was he also aware of? That these were people that were believed in human sacrifice, and they were becoming eternal repentance. So these were people giving up evil human sacrifice and becoming servants of God for eternity. And it was happening.
They became righteous, right?
Right. And Joshua was seeing it in real time happening in front of him. So he gave them a punishment, which would be a reward in the end of days. So in the end of days, people would be willing to pay for it. They may not be able to because it belongs to the Nesinim for the most part, or it's going to be like a cycle. But the Nesinim already have are first in line to receive the like the tickets to like periodically be the water carriers. It may be like just like the priests, right? Became each family of the priests each week would rotate, right? So every Shabbos you would have a new family of priests running the temple, so that every family of the Levitic priests would join in the mitzvah. So too, for the water carriers, we may have a similar situation, but at the head of the water carriers, the Nesinim, the Gibeonites, because they, unlike all the other the 30 other Canaanite nations, they're the only ones that gave up idolatry in the same generation as Joshua. The Hittites, right? Only the Hittites and the Girgashites also survived that as a people, but they went to exile so they could continue serving idols, not to serve God, so they could get away with their guilt and their evil. That's what the Hittites and the Gibeonites and the Girgashites did. But the Gibeonites submitted themselves to the God of Israel, and they're rewarded eternally as the chief among the water bearers. And just like an embedded B'nai Noach for all time. It's really cool.
I just think that's part of the end times prophecy too, because it says there'll be nations who come to join Israel, and there'll be nations who wind up utterly destroyed because they refuse.
But the really cool thing is that end time prophecy started all along. You can see in the book of Deuteronomy, especially chapter 30, already talking about the end time. And then the book of Joshua, the Gibeonites were given a task that's an eternal task. So it's really, really amazing stuff. It's like all of the books of the Bible work together. If they're actual books of the Bible, actual prophecies from God, not just books some humans wrote and wanted to attach to the Bible. So that's why it's so important to follow the Masoretic text. We have the prophets accepted these books as part of the Bible, right? So the last generation that accepted books of the Bible was the generation of Ezra. So the Tanakh was closed by the prophets of Israel. And the sages in the time of the Gemara, even it says about Rabbi Akiva that he was the greatest sage in history. That even Moses said, "Why didn't you give the Torah through Rabbi Akiva instead of me?" That's how impressed Moses was with Rabbi Akiva. But nevertheless, when Ezra closed the Tanakh, it remained closed until Mashiach comes. Nobody is adding to the Bible. So therefore, if you see any book after the time of Ezra, you already got a hint. And guess what? It cannot actually be a part of the Tanakh. Fascinating. So, and when Mashiach comes, we'll already have Elijah the prophet back. So again, when the age of prophecy returns, then you could add books of the prophets. When the age of prophecy closes, that's when you can't add more books of prophecy. And that's precisely what other religions try to do. So from the outset, you could just see, this must be heretical, right? If they're claiming this is a prophecy. Remember, in Deuteronomy, it says if a person claims to be a prophet, but his words don't come true, he's a false prophet and he's put to death. Right? So it's not just making a ridiculous claim and getting caught. It's creating a heresy that's punishable by death by the Torah law, and they're defying God's will to that extent. So whenever you find a pseudo text of the Bible, what you're finding is a heretical book that's attempting to change God's holy word, which Deuteronomy twice says don't add or subtract from the Torah. So it's very important. Every text that claims to be a book of the Bible, from the time of Ezra until the time of Mashiach, is all a heresy, a lie, and the authors were of severe spiritual guilt. It's just like a self-incrimination. And there's even a discussion if somebody goes around claiming they're a prophet, if they're not crazy, so technically they could deserve a death penalty just by claiming they're a prophet. Because a prophet either proves they're a prophet or they're lying. And to lie about prophecy, it's worthy of a death penalty. So it's very powerful, if we think about these things. Any comments on this point before we continue? All right, so really cool. This the concept of the Gibeonites, how they kind of metamorphosized into righteous Gentiles permanently attached to Israel. It's really cool. But again, it goes to the fact that in the very generation that Israel entered the land, the Gibeonites, even though they couldn't help themselves and they lied about it, nevertheless, they actually gave up human sacrifice in real time. Really, really amazing, considering the extent of all the other 30 nations of the Canaanites went to keep their evil. The Hittites moved up to Asia Minor, and the Girgashites moved down to an area a little west of Ethiopia. All just so they could hide from the fact that God is real and God commanded, don't kill humans. But they would rather journey hundreds of miles rather than give up their evil. The Gibeonites, sure, they were deceitful at first, but they gave up the evil. So that's why. So the curse of Joshua became a blessing for eternity. Really, really cool. I really, really like how that plays out. Just God's mastery. You know what I'm saying? God
Well, they were
inspired Joshua.
sparks. They were Hashem's sparks, and the Jewish people did their job. They saved them.
But it's really amazing, But technically, deceiving that, that
Yeah.
who knows what the punishment could have been. But Joshua gave a blessing that if they became righteous would be a blessing. The curse became a blessing.
So cool, so cool, so cool.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But how many curses became blessings in history because people chose to be righteous? And that's exactly what happened to the Nethinim.
They accepted the decree from heaven and worked with it. That's a big key point for all of us to remember.
So now this is another thing against, if you think about it, it's another thing against racism. The race of the Canaanites, which was declared basically God's enemy, among them is the Gibeonites, who chose to be God's eternal servants. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas the Nineveh, which God sent a prophet from Israel to Babylonia area and to Assyria, they repented for a few years, but in this very same generation, they turned back to evil, and then they sent Sancheriv to attack the Jews and exile the 10 tribes. For all of God's efforts for Nineveh, it only lasted for a decade or two before the Assyrians turned evil. But the Gibeonites, basically, they have an eternal repentance.
This is so understated. It's not, it should be broadcast to the world.
Exactly. I mean, it's more profound than the book of Jonah in a sense. That's why I'm taking the time to point this out. You understand? And it's kind of like in between the lines, you have to really focus on it. But this is what's happening here. So I think this is one of the most profound lessons we learned here in chapter 3 of Nehemiah. And it's just like verse 26, just mentioning a series of other things. But reading between the lines, we see the amazing thing that occurred.
Well, look at the money they put into they didn't just reinforce a huge section of the wall. They built a water tower. Not cheap.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back into the verses. So, thank God. That's why this is not just a book of records. This is a part of the Holy Writ. It's there's holiness in here. We just have to delve deeper to try to reach it sometimes, but it's there. Okay. So that's why humans can't just try to edit this, and humans can't try to copy it. We saw that all the books that people attempted to add to the Bible, and claim it was God's word, they pale in comparison. You know, the other books contradicted themselves more than the Bible sometimes. So it's just obviously not the work of God like the Tanakh is. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. Going back into the Hebrew and verse, let's see, in the theme, we're in verse 26. So verse 27 onward. Achrav hechaziku hatakoim mida shenis mineged hamigdal hagadol hayotze vad chomas haofel me'al sha'ar hasusim hechaziku hakohanim ish leneged beso. Achrav hechazik tzadok ben imer neged beso v'achrav hechazik shmaya ben shechanya shomer sha'ar hamizrach. Acharav hechazik Hananya ben Shalemiah v'Chanun ben Salaf Hashishi Mida Shenis Acharav hechazik Meshulam ben Berechia neged Nishkaso. Acharav hechazik Malkia ben Tzorfi ad Beis Hanasinim v'Recholim neged Shar HaMifkad vad Aliyas Hapina uven Aliyas Hapina Shar Hatzon hechaziku Hatzorfim v'Recholim. Okay, please translate through verse 32, 27 through 32.
After him, the Tekotas reinforced a similar measure from opposite the great extending tower up the wall of the Ophel. The Kohanim reinforced above the horses' gate, each one opposite his home. And after Zadok, son of Immer, reinforced opposite his house after him. Shemaiah, son of Shechkanan, guard of the eastern gate, reinforced. After him, Hanaa, son of Sha'elam, and Hanun, the sixth son of Zaphah, reinforced a similar measure after him. Meshula, son of Berekah, reinforced opposite his chamber. After him, Malakah, the son of the goldsmith, reinforced up to the house of Nethaim, and the merchants opposite Hamipakah gate, up to the tower ascent. The smiths and the merchants reinforced between the tower ascent and the sheep gate.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, so now, okay, now that we discussed how they were repairing the temple, now we're going to discuss the reaction of Sanballat and his cronies. Verse 33. Vahi kasher shama Sanballat ki anachnu vonim es hachoma vayichar lo bichas harbe vayal eg al haYehudim. Please translate 33.
It happened when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, that he became enraged, and he grew extremely angry, and he ridiculed the Jews.
Here in the Hebrew 34, Vayomer Bifnei Achav v'chel Shomron v'yomer ma haYehudim ha'amelalim osim hayazvu lahem hayizbachu hayechalu vayom hayechayu esoavonim me'aremos ve'afar v'hema surufos. Please translate 34.
He spoke before his compatriots and the populace of Samaria and said, "What are these Jewish weaklings doing? Will they reinforce the wall? Will they bring offerings? Can they finish in a day? Can they restore the stones out of the mounds of dirt when they have been charred?"
So here, the first reference of the populace of these three nations who were opposing Israel under Sanballat, they're called the populace of Samaria. In other words, the first Samaritans. They're introduced in the Bible as enemies of the Jews, not the good Samaritans. This is the actual nature of it. It's kind of like listening to the BBC discuss Palestinians and Israelis, right? So you have no idea what's actually going on if you put on that news show, you know. But so Samaritans check onto the scene in Tanakh as enemies of God's people, and God's decree that after 70 years the Jews would return to the Holy Land. Okay, continuing verse 35. V'tovia ha'amoni etzlo vayomer gam asher hem bonim im yala shu'al ufaratz chomas avnehem. Please translate 35.
Tobiah the Ammonite was next to him and said, "Even that which they build, if even a fox were to go up, he would breach their stone wall."
And now let's read verse 36. Shema Eloheinu ki hayinu v'uza v'ashev charpasam el rosham u'nesem u'senem leviza be'eretz shivya. Okay, please translate 36.
Hear our God, that we are an object of scorn. Return their humiliation upon their own heads. Make them despoiled in the land of captivity.
So this is what Nehemiah is saying. Now he continues his prayer in verse 37. Val techas ela alavonam v'chatasam milfanecha al timacha ki hichisu l'neged havonim v'nivne esachoma. Okay, well, so please translate verse 37.
Do not cover up their sins, nor let their transgressions be eradicated from before you, for they have reviled the builder. Reviled the builder, excuse me.
Yeah, so they came up, we're being insulted for trying to serve you, and they're insulting those who are building according to your will. And then verse 38 to conclude the chapter, Vanivne esachoma vatikasher kol hachoma ad chetzia vayhi lev la'am lasos. Please translate 38.
Yet we built the wall when the entire wall was joined halfway. The people were heartened to accomplish.
Okay, let's go to the commentary here. What do we mean? Wall, we built the wall, but it was joined halfway. So what's going on here? Okay, Linda, read verse 38's commentary, please.
Okay, I'm trying to find there.
Page
35,
29.
36, 37.
Yeah, 38 is right after
38. Yet we built the wall
Yep.
despite the abuse and the rage against us. We persisted in building Mesudos. When the entire wall was joined, the breaches resulted in gaps in the wall. When they were filled, the wall was joined, Ibn Ezra Mesudos, halfway. The breaches were completely filled in for half the perimeter of the city. Verse 32 records the completion of the wall at the sheep gate, yet the text now states that the wall was only half complete. Mesudotes reconciles the discrepancy. After making the general statement that the wall was completed, verse 32, the narrative now returns to the time when it was only half finished and describes in detail, chapter 4, how the enemies then threatened to attack and how the Jews defended themselves and continued to build. The people were hardened to accomplish, literally act. The joining of half the wall made the people enthusiastic about continuing the construction. Rashi Mezudos. Not only were the people determined, undeterred by their enemies, but they were enthusiastic about proceeding. There was no fear or lethargy on their part. Malbim.
Okay, so now let's try to describe it outside so we understand what we've read in this chapter as far as the construction. So it's not that the entire people went and built one piece of wall. The different individuals' families were told, okay, you see that those 3 acres of the wall, your family's going to build that part, and then your family's going to build that part. Because remember, Jerusalem was twice the size in an era without machines to help them build, and with much more smaller workforce than they really wanted to have. So individual families were set up to build between this wall and this breach and that breach, this part and that part. Okay, so now previously, for example, in verse 33, we say we were building the wall, right? And then in verse 38, yet we built the wall. But then later in verse 38, it says when the entire wall, the phrase entire wall was not used until verse 38. Right? So individual sections of the wall were being built at a time, but multiple areas of the wall were being built up at the same time, but they would finish one section at a time. Like you're putting up a house, you finish one wall or one corner of the wall, so the two corners are holding up each other better, and the wind doesn't blow it down. So similarly, what they were doing, you see where it says they worked on a breach, and they worked on the wall. So there were sections where there was no wall whatsoever, and there were sections where it was like like it looked like somebody took a giant bite out of it, right? There was a breach. So where there was no wall whatsoever, they would first put a wall there, and then they would repair the breach. Where there was already a wall, but just a little breach in it, so then they would simply repair the breach, and because there was already a wall. But the phrase "the entire wall" is only here in the concluding verse 38, and it was joined halfway. Again, they were building their sections individually, and it went towards the middle. They didn't start at the middle and go towards the corners, right? So it all worked like that. Okay. Very good. Okay, so let's just for the drama of it, let's start chapter 4, but maybe we're going to pause here. Let's go just a few verses into chapter 4 because it's becoming more and more exciting. And then we'll pause here, and perhaps we'll start again next time on chapter 4, verse 1. So, Russell, when we pause for today, please record it as we started chapter 2:16 until chapter 3, verse 38. But let's go just a few more verses into chapter 4, just for the fun of it. Okay. Okay. So, all right. Okay. So let me say in the Hebrew, Vayikasher Shaman Sanvalat Dovia Ravim Vamonim Vaashdodim. He also Arucha Lechomos Yerushalayim. He Echelu Haparutzim Lisasem Vichar Lahem Maod. Can you translate verse 1?
It happened when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Amorites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being healed, that the breaches had begun to be sealed. They grew extremely angry.
Well, at least they're happy for Hashem's holy city being rebuilt. Good Samaritans, come on. Okay. Vayikashru chulam yachdav lavo lilachem Yerushalayim v'lasus lo toah. Please translate verse 2.
So they all banded together to come and do battle in Jerusalem and to bring ruin upon it.
Bringing gifts onto the high priest of the Lord. Okay. Good Samaritans, good Samaritans. Hey, why aren't you judging favorably? Okay. Yeah. Vanis palel el Elohinu v'na'amid mishmor alehem yomam v'layla mipenehem. Please translate verse 3.
So we prayed to our God, and we set up a guard over the workers by day and by night against them.
Okay. So let's read another couple of verses. Verse 4, Vayomer Yehuda kashal koach hasabol ve'afor harbe v'anachnu lo nuchal livnos b'choma. Okay, please translate verse 4.
Then the men of Judah said, the strength of the bearer is failing, and the earth is abundant. We are not able to build the wall. And
So let's conclude with verse 5 for today's reading. But next time we'll start again, chapter 4, verse 1. We'll try to get concentrate on it from the whole narrative. Okay, so verse 5, Vayomeru Tzarenu lo yedu v'lo yeru ad asher navo al tocham v'haragnum v'hishbasnu es hamalacha. Please translate verse 5.
And our enemies said, they will not know of us, nor see us, before we come among them and kill them, and we halt the work.
You see how much they care about the Jewish people? It's really amazing. It reminds us of so many things going on in the United Nations and by people you would think would welcome the Jewish people, but it's the
I
exact
thought Ezra's prayer was interesting, where our Nehemiah's prayer, because that was very similar to what the British Prime Minister said to the world when he announced they weren't going to stop with Hamas stacking them. He said, God knows what you got. He said pretty much, wasn't the same words, but it comes down to the same thing.
Well, Nehemiah said it first, so if anyone was inspired,
it was, well, I know it was him, but I just thought it was interesting that this is very similar to what he said when he said, no, you're not, that's not happening. Nehemiah said the same thing. God help us. It's not happening.
So remember Psalm 121, Hine Elohim v'lo shomer Israel. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither sleeps nor slumbers. Hashem will protect Israel, and Mashiach will come very soon. And but it's just, we see so much history repeating itself. You'd think people would be saying, oh, the awesome God of the land is returning his people here, Nothing like that. They're just becoming enraged that the Jews are establishing themselves in the land promised to them for eternity. It's just, and again, here in the book of Nehemiah, people were leaving behind the human sacrifice, and there were like three ideas in the world of religion that were very popular: paganism, and then among that is then you'd have the Greeks and the Roman pantheons that would come from that, and then the Zoroastrianism, and then the monotheism from the Jews. But not just the Jews, also the Nesinim were also monotheists as well, and others as well. So it's really, really interesting how it all works out. But the key is that it's nothing new that people are not treating God's promise to the Jewish people, God's eternal promise to the Jewish people. They're not treating it as something that they should make room for. Just let the Jews, have freedom in their land at least. Why do you have to get involved in it? But instead we see that people have to try to stick their 2 cents and their noses into it. And it has nothing to do with them whatsoever. Sanballat was getting angry for nothing, and they were willing to go to war for it. And it's just so profound. And the discussion of the book of Isaiah talks about world peace, and then the book of Ezekiel talks about a final war. So the book of Isaiah is talking about God's perspective and God's wishes and what Israel would do if they were just given the freedom to do it. And the book of Ezekiel is talking about, what people are prone to do, their attempt to try to stop Israel and thereby force a war in the end of days. And hopefully we've already achieved all the necessary wars, and we're able to have Mashiach come very soon in our days. All right, thank you for learning with me. We'll start chapter 4 next time, God willing. Any final questions or comments before we call it the session?
Very good, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Was wonderful.
Shem, it's God's book. It's been there waiting on our shelves. It's right there. You don't need to wait for me for it. But I just thought, the concept of the Nesinim, the Gibeonites, it's in some ways even more profound of a story than the Nineveh, and the book of Jonah, because God's prophet, punished them, and they stay faithful. We have biblical evidence of a nation of Gentiles staying faithful to the God of Israel for eternity. Isn't that beautiful? So beautiful. All right. Thanks for learning with me. Let's looking forward to next time. Bye. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Thank you.